Yes, your boy Crypto Blood, and welcome to another Kicking It session. Wow, what a way to end 2019. What better way but with Andreas Antonopoulos. Look, I've been in cryptos for, it's going on 7 years now, and you know, it's been a real pleasure to have him on the channel today, simply because he was the person I went to when I got into cryptos, and I think very underappreciated in this crypto community. So I want you guys to enjoy this interview with Andreas Antonopoulos. I think should be credited for bringing millions and millions of people to Bitcoin in the early days, or at least educating them on it, even if they didn't actually pull the trigger. But hey, enjoy this. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And to get these types of interviews and videos early, join my member group on YouTube. Just click the join button to get more details on that. All right, happy New Year's, people. I'm out of here. Holla. It's your boy Crypto Blood, and welcome to another Kicking It session. Today I've got Andreas Antonopoulos. It's really a pleasure because you were the first person, Andreas, that I looked to online on YouTube.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Direction in the whole crypto game. Back then, it was only you. Maybe Mad Bitcoins. I don't know if you remember that guy.
Of course. Yeah. I did some shows with Thomas.
Yeah. And like Trace Mayer. I mean, you three were like the only ones back then. So it's just really...
I feel old. Man.
Me too, man.
It's like been doing this for 7 years. Like, wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Long time.
Man. So the song request you had today, Blue Monday by New Order. Why that song?
That's the song I kicked off every one of my radio stations when I was a pirate radio DJ in Greece in the 1980s.
Wow.
It was our station jingle. Yeah.
That's funny. I wonder how many people knew that about you.
Not many. It brings back memories. Occasionally I have people play it when I jump on stage because they ask me, you know, what song do you want to come on stage with? And I'm like, okay, here we go.
Well, again, I know we're limited on time. You're a busy man, and I'm really glad to have you on. So first, man, I mean, look, you know, for me, it's a great end to a year to have you on, but we're ending a decade, right? So yeah, let's talk about Bitcoin in that frame, right? This decade of Bitcoin. You know, what are your thoughts? Because I have some of my own as far as how we've changed, we've evolved, and that's okay.
Of course.
You know, change is constant. So kind of give me your assessment of where we are with Bitcoin. Because the early days, man, it was really a libertarian, like anarchist, geeky type of thing, right? And I know when I got into it, it was more the libertarian aspect of it. At that point, we were, you know, F the bankers, you know, we're gonna bank, you know, be our own bank and stuff. So kind of give us your take of where we are.
Well, you know, some of us got into Bitcoin because of the F the bankers, and a lot more people got into Bitcoin because they had been effed by the bankers repeatedly over sometimes decades, sometimes only just a few years. And, you know, one of the amazing things about Bitcoin is that it launched at a time when I think for the first time in a long time, perhaps in centuries, an entire generation got effed by the bankers. So it wasn't just one country or another country. The global financial crisis was the bankers giving an entire generation, the millennial generation, the finger, and then all of the politicians all around the world letting them get away with it and making millennials pay the price. So we're now living in the first decade of the lost generation from a perspective of financial opportunity. The generation that was betrayed by the banks and had to bail out the banks on the back of student loans and massive debt and no employment opportunities and a grinding decade of mounting inequality and a completely rigged system. And this is the moment that Bitcoin got born, and it got born into the system where it became impossible to hide the fact that the system's rigged. I think that's the backdrop for Bitcoin, and continues to be the backdrop for many of us. You know, for the first time ever, an entire generation got to experience what my parents' generation experienced in Greece with financial crisis after financial crisis and currency problem after currency problem. And what a lot of people around the world experience is why I talk about this technology being about the other 6 billion. It's because until now, the Western developed nations that had stable currencies and stable institutions really didn't feel really the pain of a banking system that acts as a giant parasite on the back of humanity. And of course, that all changed in 2008. Now, at least a generation of Americans and Canadians and Europeans get to experience what it's been like for generations for Greeks and Argentinians and Mexicans and all the people around the world who've been living under these systems.
So, I mean, and that's true. But, I'm sure you know and have seen the evolution of like what we look to Bitcoin to do. Like, to me, I don't see it as what I did before, in the early days, as a means of payment for, a coffee or to buy a shirt online or something like that. It seems like Bitcoin has transitioned to more of an asset. And I want to know, I mean, it's always been maybe both, but I'm saying now it seems more the pendulum is swinging toward a digital asset, something you can hold or store wealth in and transfer that wealth. But do you think that we're now moving toward that paradigm of it's more of a gold 2.0, or what are your thoughts?
I think
on
it's
that?
both.
Okay.
I think it's both. I think it's always been both. What shifted is the attention of the market. And part of that has a lot less to do with what Bitcoin did and a lot more to do with how the governments around the world reacted to Bitcoin. So governments made it very, very difficult, on purpose, in my opinion, to spend Bitcoin as money. And the first and foremost attempt to do that was by the United States, where the IRS classified it as a commodity and decided to apply capital gains on any transaction, no matter how small, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it almost impossible to use as money because the accounting burden that creates is ridiculous. And so that pushes people to do larger transactions more infrequently. And of course, the other thing is that in its current incarnation, Bitcoin was not able to scale to a level where you could do very, very, very cheap and small transactions. In order to do that, we had to look to other solutions. And, a lot of different solutions are being explored, including bigger blocks, which you've seen some of Bitcoin's forks attempt. Various side chains, drive chains, state chains, etc., which various other systems are exploring, sharding and things like that, as well as layer 2 technologies, the Lightning Network, which is the primary push in the Bitcoin space. So, these two things happen simultaneously. On the one hand, you have a difficulty in doing very small transactions from a technical perspective, and on the other hand, you have the accounting burden. But Bitcoin hasn't stopped being money for a lot of us. We continue to use it. I pay my staff with Bitcoin. Not all of them, but some of them. I get paid myself in Bitcoin.
I remember, you talked about this on the first time you were on Joe Rogan's show, which was epic back then. I was just like, wow. I'm like, man, this guy is really doing it. He's really spreading the word about Bitcoin. And even on London Real, you did a good job there on the first time you were on there.
Thank you.
But you talked about like Bitcoin being money or it being an asset, and I'm concerned with what I saw happen in 2017 and that transition from the peer-to-peer aspect of it. But you started to see Wall Street come in.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Of course.
And now I'm like, we're taking I think the tone is changing here.
Although the tone changed even in 2014. As soon as people realized that you could make money on this, as soon as there was blood in the water, the sharks showed up.
Right.
And even though there's a lot of ideology among a lot of people who want this and understand that the impact that this will have on society in the long term is about much more than a speculative asset. Of course, there's a ton of opportunists who see it as a speculative asset, but has that changed what Bitcoin is or what
Technically,
Bitcoin
no.
is going to do. No, it hasn't changed at
No.
all. Whether a bunch of opportunists have come in and seen this as an opportunity to make a quick buck and also play off the fears and FOMO and panic selling of newbie investors, as they do in any market, arguably, creating this kind of gold rush mentality. Whether that is happening or not, that doesn't change the fact that for many people around the world, that's not what it is. It's actually a lifeboat to save them from currencies that are imploding and governments that are corrupt, dictators, and things like that. And also, it doesn't change the social impact and the economic impact of this technology over the long term. This technology is going to change the world, and it's going to change how we see money. Whether or not Wall Street tries to make a circus out of it in the meantime doesn't really change the long-term trajectory.
No, it doesn't change the long-term trajectory of the technology. I am concerned about it affecting possibly Bitcoin because, and again, this is only
Well, they've tried, haven't they? They tried in 2017, and one of the things that Bitcoin proves, which I think was really fascinating, is that you can't buy control of Bitcoin by throwing money at it. You can't even buy control of Bitcoin by throwing money and enormous amounts of hash power at attempting to change the protocol's direction. And the people who tried to lost a great deal of money trying to, and ended up being rejected by the community at large.
But are you concerned with the concentration of power in Bitcoin from a
Nope.
wallet perspective?
No, not at all.
These exchanges? Okay, explain
I,
why.
I'm not concerned because what 2017 proved is that having a lot of Bitcoin doesn't actually buy you anything. Neither does having a lot of hash power. Because in the end, the economic activity of users determines whether the token can be sold. So miners can mine a token that they can't sell. And people who hold a lot of Bitcoin can see the value diminish if they try to break the protocol. So the system of incentives actually works to repel attacks, and it did effectively repel attacks. Mm-hmm. And as a result, people who wanted to change the trajectory of the protocol effectively made their own forks. And we ended up with a fragmented Bitcoin. But now that means that you can choose which set of principles you want to follow, and then the market can choose between them. Effectively, it was impossible to change the consensus rules when there wasn't enough consensus. And so to me, it proved stronger. Lots of whales throwing lots of money around Bitcoin. So far, all they've managed to do in some cases is bankrupt themselves. And in other cases, they've just managed to pump the price. I really don't pay attention to most of that. In fact, when it comes to interviews, almost any question that starts with, "But aren't you concerned?" ends with no.
Okay, so central banks, right? They're because here's my thing. I just want us to capture the broader audience before they do. Is basically what I'm trying to get to.
But they already have the broader audience.
I know. I'm saying as far as
they already have it. They have billions of people who believe that money has to be created by governments in order to have value. The money and economies have to be controlled by governments in order to have stability. And that myth is entirely prevalent in our society. The vast majority of people believe in that myth. The only way to break that myth is to let it play its out. So, the one thing central banks can do is actually fulfill that myth. If they could create stability and if they could create value with their control, then why the hell are we 10 years after that great financial recession heading into another one with the economy more unequal than ever and most of the financial institutions in dire straits requiring continuous bailouts? Your patient isn't doing very well if you have to pump them full of epinephrine just to get their heart to beat. This is not a healthy economy. We haven't had a healthy economy since 2008, and we're not going to have a healthy economy.
I guess I was referring to getting to the masses, meaning us in the crypto community, getting them adopted to this new ideology before they pervert it, because that's now what they are doing. The central banks are creating their own central digital, central bank digital currencies, right? And how do we as a community help people to say, hey, look, that is not real cryptocurrency,
We
because they're
don't.
going to, okay,
We
what do
we
we do?
don't. We can listen. You can lead a horse to water, as the expression goes, but you can't make them drink. And the bottom line is simple. Um, we will provide the necessary information to people. Beyond that, this isn't about everybody making the same choice. This isn't even about the majority of people making the right choice. You can't control that, and we shouldn't even be trying. That's a paternalistic attitude which says we know better, follow us or be doomed. What Bitcoin represents, in my opinion, is choice. So the goal isn't to have everybody make the right choice or even to make the Bitcoin choice. The goal is to provide a choice so that when people need it, if people need it, it's there, and to break the monopoly of these other systems by providing an alternative choice. Not everybody needs that choice. Not everybody wants that choice. But we need to make sure that choice exists. So if people want to play with central bank digital currencies, if they think those are going to provide them something better than what they have now, great. Go for it. By all means, let's have some competition in an open market for currency where choice exists. That's what I care about. And in that competition, I have very little doubt that open systems win. I'm not worried about it because central bank digital currencies cannot be open, cannot be borderless, cannot be neutral, cannot be censorship resistant, cannot be immutable. They cannot do any of the things that crypto does because they're controlled by central banks.
I'm confused as to what difference they are versus the current digital currencies, fiat currencies they have.
They're exactly as different as a pig with lipstick versus a pig without lipstick.
It's crazy, man. So that's
it's basically a sales job. It's a marketing job. Now, they are different, however, in one critical aspect, which is they will enable far greater surveillance and control.
Yes,
I've been saying for years now that we are at a crossroads and we are not facing a battle between analog money of today and digital money of the future. We are facing a battle between digital money controlled and managed by the state, a complete surveillance and control framework that you cannot escape, and digital money that is open and free, that people can have choices in. That's the choice. The analog money will not be around for much longer. Analog money is on the way out. Governments are desperately trying to eradicate it, taking as many measures as they can to discredit cash, to make cash associated with criminal activity, and in many countries, to implement laws that prevent you from using cash for smaller and smaller and smaller amounts until they can eradicate it eventually completely and take control of the money system completely. Now, that is basically a totalitarian model of money that they're trying to implement. That's the choice we have. And the key here is to continue to offer a choice that is the opposite of that. Because eventually people are going to have to choose, and some people are going to be making the wrong choice. Just like today, you have the open internet, and you can get your information from Wikipedia, and you can get your information from Facebook. And some people get their information from Facebook, and those people are idiots. It's as simple as that. And you can't stop people from doing idiotic things like giving all of the information to companies that abuse it.
Yeah, and but that goes to the point you said, we have to let people, we can't force people to pick. We have to let them choose for themselves, but we find in history that the masses typically don't pick the right direction on their own.
Some do. Right. Yeah. Some do, and they often do pick the right direction on their own. It's just if we look at history, mostly it takes crisis to push people out of their comfort zone and get them to the point where they finally make good choices. And on the road to those good choices, they may make a lot of bad turns. I mean, but you can't change human nature. Let's go wrapping back to the beginning of this conversation. What happened over the past decade? What happens to Bitcoin? I think can be summarized very, very nicely with people happened to Bitcoin. And when there were just a few people, all fairly consistent in their perspective and ideology, because they're the only ones who would even pay attention to this, things were a lot simpler. But we're not going to go back to those days. This was always the path that this system was going to do, like every other technology, which is as you go mainstream, the initial principles get diluted, people come in and they try to apply their own ideas, and the system changes. What's really interesting and really great about Bitcoin and many other cryptocurrencies is that they're not as easy to co-opt, and change. And that's one of their prevailing characteristics, right? The ability of Bitcoin to survive mainstreaming without being completely co-opted and corrupted is what makes it special. So what happened over the last decade to Bitcoin? People happened. And, some of those people were assholes.
Yeah.
They came for the
like I
money
said,
and the
we got to
Lambos.
be so careful. I feel like we're at on the cusp of a 1984. This Orwellian system state. The Sesame credit. Okay, so we're getting limited on time here. I do want to talk about quantum computing and this next, I think, evolution in technology and leap step I think we're taking in our society when it comes to technology. What's your take on the threat of quantum computers on?
Oh, it's a load of bullshit hype, and it's such a huge distraction. I think it's one of those cases where people fixate on a specific topic that seems to get a lot of attention. And when you get into Bitcoin for the first time, you're looking for a catch, right? What's the catch? Will Satoshi come back and change everything? Will it be controlled by someone? What's the catch? Does it have some catastrophic bug? This can't be true. And you're constantly looking for a catch. People fixate on one or two things that seem easy to understand. One of them, for example, is 51% attacks. What if all the Bitcoin run out in 2140? How is mining going to continue? Simple numbers which have specific fixed qualities to them become the focus point. And quantum computing is one of those ideas. The truth is that quantum computing is decades away at best from affecting cryptocurrencies. And
do you think we'll be able to upgrade the protocol?
There's plans to upgrade the protocol in 2020 with a new signature scheme called Schnorr signatures. I don't see why we wouldn't be able to upgrade the protocol to another signature scheme like Lamport signatures that is quantum resistant. And, most people will have an opportunity with plenty of warning and plenty of tools to move their coins to signatures and keys that are protected against quantum computing. And again, some will not. Some will make poor choices and have their money ripped off by the first.
I remember back in the day you talked about hitting that critical mass point where we'll be past that point of no return to be able to upgrade the protocol. You don't see us there yet, do you? Evidently not with your statement. But when you see that point being?
Well, I think that it gets harder and harder. So what happens is that the types of upgrades you can do become limited only to the upgrades that have overwhelming consensus and support, which means they have to be absolutely critical updates. It's harder and harder to make updates on the whim. It's harder and harder to make simple updates. These have to be critical updates. And as a result, Bitcoin, in terms of its critical updates, if you like, in terms of changing protocol characteristics, now it becomes a question of prioritizing what things need to be done first. I've always said that privacy is a very big priority because we have to do that in layer one. And it looks like the next set of updates we're going to be doing to Bitcoin, and I'm talking about Schnorr signatures, Taproot, and TapScript, are features that are very critical to privacy and future upgradability. But, I don't see any problem with upgrading Bitcoin to make it quantum resistant, meaning that for that, there will be consensus. There's no question about that. There will be overwhelming consensus. The question is, will you have consensus for other changes? That may be a bit trickier.
Gotcha. So, lastly, man, I guess we can just talk about the future of this space. One thing that's very recent, I'm sure you heard, YouTube went through and, I don't think it was actually YouTube, but there's been many instances of centralized entities kind of censoring Bitcoin, cryptocurrency topics, and so on and so forth. What's your take on how, as a community, we should approach this? Is it too soon to say, let's all jump off and go to a decentralized platform?
Absolutely.
Are we preaching to the choir, though, at that point?
Yeah, absolutely.
Platforms?
And that's exactly why I continue to work with, unfortunately, centralized platforms, because that's where I'm going to find an audience that needs to hear about this technology. I can't go and fish for noobs on a decentralized platform, because that's putting the cart before the horse. You got to get them interested in the concept of decentralization first and explain its benefits before you go telling them that. And in order to learn about decentralization, you need to know about decentralization. That's not going to work.
Right.
Yeah, YouTube got a bit trigger happy with some of its algorithms, and they take thousands of videos down all the time because of scams and pyramid schemes and Ponzi's and things like that. That's the problem with centralized platforms. If you want them to be paternalistic daddy platforms that protect innocent investors from scams, then you have to realize that on the threshold, on the edge case, they're going to sweep a bunch of good or better podcast, video shows, whatever, into their algorithms, because you can't tune these perfectly. They're not perfect. They never can be. So that's why censorship is bad. And it's much better to let people, learn the hard way about investment choices, and don't try to pick and choose winners. But that's how YouTube does its business. So in the meantime, we have to be careful. My channel wasn't affected. I'm very, very careful to make sure that my content is purely educational. And from that perspective, by being very strictly neutral and not doing endorsements, not promoting investments and things like that, I think that may have played a role in why my channel wasn't affected. But at the same time, that's not something I can feel comfort in, right? Oh, it didn't affect me doesn't mean that's a good thing. This time, exactly. And, one day they're going to roll down the shutters on my video channel too. There's no question about that. In the meantime, make good backups is all I can say. And no matter how many channels they close, with Bitcoin, we never had the advantage of being mainstream, having a strong voice, having a ready audience, and not being censored. We've always been the underdog. We've always been censored. We've always have found it hard to reach people. So just do more. Keep educating, keep doing a good job, and I know you are. So thanks again for having me on the show. It's been
absolutely. Last question before we wrap up. What's something that you've really never publicly said about cryptocurrency in the space that you would be willing to share? What's something that you kind of think about at night that you've never really
a lot of people wonder about the identity of Satoshi Nakamoto. Here it comes. I am not Satoshi Nakamoto. There you go. There's your scoop. I am definitely not smart enough, certainly not eloquent enough to be Satoshi Nakamoto, and that's the scoop. There you go.
All right, Andreas Antonopoulos on for a Kicking It session, guys. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. I'm gonna have to have him back on. I usually do about an hour, so we only had 30 minutes today. I'll have him back on again in the future, guys. Happy New Year's, Andreas. We'll talk to you soon.
Happy New Year. Thank you. Bye-bye.